So yes, the YouTube link is there. Just okay. So I make a short welcoming to all participants who are now here. Good morning to everybody. Nice to see you again. Today we're starting with a social humanitarian discussion. And after our short coffee break, we have got the economic expert review. And in the afternoon, we are going to have the working groups, as we explained yesterday. The security group starts with the public speaking workshop, and the others are going to continue their working process on the final papers. And then we have another second sessions where we switch. So politics and economics go to our expert Jan Slot to make the public speaking workshop, and the security group is going to continue their work. And we finish at 4 p.m., 4:30, so we will see. Yes, and you can find all the links and the program in your mails. I've sent it to you this morning and in the Facebook group as well. So, but if you have any technical issues, just write me and we will find a solution. Yes, and now I give the word to Diana. Yeah. And we have some minutes left. We're a little bit too early.
Yeah, we're waiting for Svetlana yet.
We're the early birds today. So I let the other people in, and yeah, you can grab a cup of coffee to bridge the time.
Yeah. So Beatrice, you are managing accepting everyone, right?
Yes, I manage that, and you, yeah, don't worry. I have just a short question. Every participant, could you please change your name into name, surname, and then country of citizenship, and then your group? Because afterwards it would be easier to manage the breakout sessions. So you need to go to your own picture on Zoom, and then you make the then right click and there you can change your name into, oh, I will do it as well, into name, surname, country, and group. That would be great. Yeah, thank you. Voila. That works. Wonderful.
Okay, I have 5 minutes left. You don't see Svetlana yet?
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello. Hi, Denise.
Hi. Yuri, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Good morning. Yes.
Good morning. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. Hi, all.
Hi. Is Svetlana is with us as well? Hello, Svetlana. Good morning.
Good morning. We are currently waiting for
Well,
some
what?
other participants, and then we are going to start. Just a second.
Just 1 minute left.
And once again, to all participants, could you please change your name in Zoom into name, surname, country, and group? Because that will make it easier for us to put you into the working groups. So you have to click on your picture on Zoom, and then you have the option to change your name.
Mhm.
So I think we have a new expert who joined our panel today. Hello, Yuri.
Hi.
So yeah, last minute confirmed. Thank you very much for joining.
My pleasure.
And just for how to let you know how the panel will be built. So we will build it around 3 questions, and Paul, you, and Svetlana will have the word one after the other. So to make this, because we have 3 main topics. The first is about civilians and their daily life in a war zone. Then the second is the role of international organizations on the ground. So how the OSCE is working, any other NGOs, and how the Minsk agreements are actually implemented on the ground. And the third question would be addressing the war of information. So who has access to the territory, which information from which country is provided there, and how it shapes the way the conflict is seen by civilians there and by all international readers who are reading about these topics. So if you're okay with that, is there any other topic you'd like to talk about, or?
I'm sure the topics will come up as we progress. So let's start with what you suggest, and then we'll see what happens.
Great, yeah. So, Misha, Svetlana, shall we start? I think yes. Yes. Okay. Let's take it as an answer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us in the morning. We hope that you slept well after your very intense day yesterday. Today is our last day of lectures, so it's the last day you can talk with relevant experts on the topics you are working on. And just for letting our experts know, participants are working on a list of recommendations that we will send to our 4 ministries and OSCE to show how young people from our 4 countries see the resolution of Ukrainian conflict and what concrete steps we propose them to follow. And so that's why participants may have very concrete questions that they have gathered for these 2 days of working groups. So they are split in 4 working groups actually. It's one is addressing security topics, the second is addressing politics, and the third is about economy. So very, very wide work that they are providing now. About this panel today, when the idea of the panel came up, we really wanted our forum to be special, not to talk about only Minsk agreements, France, Germany, Ukraine, Russia, what we basically always read in the media. But we wanted to see how civilians are living in this war zone, and this topic is always a little bit we don't see it in the media actually, don't see that much because we see only the level of international relations, but not the level of civilians and how Ukrainian, Russian, and all living people there are having their daily life actually. And plus, what we don't see is how these international agreements are implemented on the ground. And I think it's also a very interesting topic because we see that some countries have found a common ground or found an agreement, but then we don't think about how it is implemented, and it's very difficult, and you will also talk about that. So I'd like to introduce the experts we have today. Our first expert is Mr. Paul Vougeot, who is a French journalist based now in Moscow, but he was in Ukraine for 3 years since 2014, if I'm not mistaken. He stayed there 3 years, and last time he was there was in the beginning of this year. And now Paul is working for several newspapers in France, reporting from Moscow, such as Le Monde, Libération, Ouest France, or France 24. And I think there are even more. And the articles I would definitely recommend you if you speak French, but you can still always translate it. Is a series of articles he published from the ground. There are five articles, and we will share you the link in the end. So thank you, Paul, for joining us. And our second expert is Svetlana Zakrovska, if I'm not mistaken. Svetlana is the president of Alliance for Civil Rights. It's an NGO created in 1998, based in Donetsk first, and then it moved to Kramatorsk. It's also in the Donetsk region, but in the Ukrainian-controlled territories. But they have still some activists in the Russian, in separatists areas. And the purpose of the organization is the protection of human rights of internally displaced people. They work with journalists, with the activists, and basically they are working for human rights of people living there. And maybe I let Misha, could you introduce our third expert, please?
You want me to introduce myself?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Hi. So very nice, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. My name is Yuri Sak. At the moment, I'm a partner at the communications agency CFC Big Ideas in Ukraine, which is a company that deals with strategic communications in different areas. I have in the past defended a PhD thesis. This was a long time ago in 2006. And incidentally, the topic of my research was the right to return of the internally displaced people. And ironically, when I was writing my thesis, of course, I was focusing on countries far away. I was writing it in the United Kingdom. And for my data, I focused on, countries like Sudan, countries like Sierra Leone, countries like Bosnia-Herzegovina. But I would have never thought back then that this topic would ever be relevant to Ukraine, right? So this was, the whole idea that there can be something like this in Ukraine was so unfathomable. Nobody would ever, even in their wildest dream, think of the possibility of something like this happening in Ukraine. So,
Sure.
And here we are today. If you look at the statistics, there is about 1.5 million internally displaced people in Ukraine. And the things that I researched 15 years ago, all of a sudden have become relevant to Ukraine as well. In addition, I was part of the team that set up in 2014 a Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, which is an NGO, the main purpose of which is to provide objective information to the international community about the situation in Ukraine. When we set up the Ukraine Crisis Media Center in 2014, this was a response of communications experts to the downing of the MH17 Boeing flight. This was our response to the annexation of Crimea, and this was our response to the developments in the eastern Ukraine. So at the moment, in my professional capacity, I'm both involved in consulting private businesses on strategic communications. At the same time, I get involved in certain initiatives which have to do with helping the country resolve this crisis long term.
Great. Thank you, Yuri, for your introduction. And I'm sure that your research and what you said about Ukraine and the fact that it's now a real war zone just at the borders of the European Union. It's to my mind, it's also very, very astonishing and very shocking. So thank you for being with us, and I'm sure you will contribute to the 3 questions, and especially for the third, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks to your Ukrainian Crisis Center, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So let's start. The first question will be addressed to our 3 experts, and it's about civilians on the ground, their daily life. How they find the information, what do they read, what they live, how they actually see the fact that their region is in the center of a big international crisis. So Paul, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I want first to say that since I'm based in Moscow, I decided, because I'm freelancer, so I can make this choice. I decided to stop covering Ukraine because we have a correspondent in Ukraine covering Ukraine, and I didn't want it to be a part of this journalists who cover Ukraine from Russia. But still, I want to continue to follow the Ukrainian topic, the Donbass topic, and I'm still going when I can in Donbass, in Kiev, and in Donbass to see how things are happening, to meet experts, but also to meet people living on the front line, because working from Russia, it's really important for me to know how things are happening in Ukraine, even now. because sometimes there is, I mean, I think we can all agree on that. Russia is a big, is an important actor of this conflict, and a lot of decision for the future of this conflict can be took from Russia. So I need to know more always about all the things are going on in Donbass. Life in Donbass, and I think it's the main point of the war zone, is that people, the most important for people is to always come back to the most normal situation possible. So even during the hard times of the war, people were fighting and trying to find solutions to have a kind of normal life in a not normal situation, and then with the time, and we will talk about that later, all this decision thanks to the Minsk agreement or local political decision, all these things implemented in Donbass, then life changed, improved. In some places, I think Svetlana will have more detail to say about that. In some places, there's still a lot of work to do to reorganize life of people and to make them live better. But it's something really strange when you go there as a journalist, is this kind of reflex we all have, I think, to try to come back to a normal life, even if the situation is not normal. So the first thing is to try to fix things destroyed. You can see that some schools, magazine, little shop, this kind of places were like an hospital, like a priority things to fix, places to fix, and the houses for sure, obviously, and then to try to reorganize life. And something really interesting is that the front line, which has been made like a front line you can't really cross. There is only a few places where you can cross between the so-called DNR and the Ukrainian controlled territory. It's really difficult to cross this front line. So people had to reorganize the way their cities were working. For example, last time I was in Donbass, I was in the city really close to Donetsk, and Donetsk was a kind of a big point of economical, even life attraction. Like everything was happening in Donetsk, and people from the city were before going to Donetsk to go to big supermarkets, to theater, or things like that. And so they had to reorganize the way their city was working. Even the way the food is coming to the city, because the food was coming from Donetsk before. Now it's coming more from Slavyansk or Kramatorsk or this kind of cities. So they had to reorganize everything, and then they had to reorganize a kind of cultural life, because it's something really interesting also for me, is that people from Donbass understood how important culture can be. And even in some little cities or villages, you can see some really interesting initiative of people trying to organize a new music band or a new theater organization, or things like little things, but still it's life. It's coming back of life in little places. So I think, no, I don't want to be the only one to talk, but I think Svetlana will tell us more, maybe about the daily life issues, about food, for example, or medicines. I think it's also an important issue in Donbass, the access to medicines. Yeah, but I saw a huge difference last time I was there, because I spent, I think, 2 years between my two times in Donbass. And last time I was there, it was in January, and I saw a lot of things has changed, at least in Ukrainian side, because I don't have access to the DNR, LNR side.
Thank you, Paul. Svetlana, the word goes to you.
First of all, before talking about the life of civilians, I want to underline that there are three points of three territories which we should take into consideration talking about civilians, and the life of people are totally different and problems are different. So we can take into consideration Ukrainian controlled territories, for example, Donetsk and Lugansk region, which is situated close to front line, and a main city of Donetsk region moved to Kramatorsk now. It's like regional city now, and main city of Lugansk region moved to Severodonetsk. So like the main life is in these two cities now, and decision-making bodies are in these cities also. If we talk about occupied territories, non-Ukrainian controlled territories, so it's territories with main cities Donetsk and Lugansk, which used to be main cities of Donetsk and Lugansk regions, but now they are detached from the region, and we should talk about life of people there. And also there is so-called gray zone. It's the territory between Ukrainian controlled and non-Ukrainian controlled territories. And it's a rather wide zone, and the life of civilians are totally different from the previous two zones. So if you want to talk about the life of people on Ukrainian controlled territory, I would say that it's influenced by the numerous flow of internally displaced people, first of all, and the problems of these territories related to problems of internally displaced people. Because we have some towns, some villages, some territories where the number of internally displaced people is bigger than number of locals. And first, the biggest problem of internally displaced people now, it's housing. Because unfortunately, Ukrainian government, like mostly 7 years passed since a conflict started, but Ukrainian government hasn't provided any decent program for housing of these people. And our organization, as well as numerous other organizations who work with internally displaced people, work on this direction, trying to develop various variants of such kind of program and present to the government officials. And I have to say that maybe last year we have we managed to involve governmental officials to our discussions, and now we hope that the programs will be accepted. Also, there is a big problem is so-called certificates of internally displaced people. This certificate gives you right to have governmental support. But unfortunately, not only governmental support for person as internally displaced people, but a person needs to have this certificate if the person wants to have a social welfare, pension, and so on. And it's a big problem, and it's a big violation of human rights actually related to this certificate, because a person who is internally displaced people deprived of choosing a bank. They just detach to one bank, one state bank, Ashat Bank, where they can have this welfare, pensions, and all this stuff. They deprived of right for free movement because people from social offices, social welfare offices, they have rights to come and to check if this person live here or this person moved to another place to live. And it's actually nonsense because, for example, if person moved to Kiev, for example, from Lviv, this person can have a pension in any bank without any checking of their place where they live. But if the person moved from Donetsk region, from occupied territory, they have to have pension just in one bank. They have to pass so-called verification when the person have to come to a bank personally, and sometimes we have cases when people are old and they sick and they come to a bank staying in long queues just to present themselves personally that they are alive or whatever. And we even have several cases of death in such kind of queues. And also verification, the part of such kind verification when people from governmental offices can come to the place where people live and say, show us this person. And also we have several cases when a person was in a hospital, a senior person was in a hospital, but people from governmental office came and they didn't see this person on the place where this person lived, declared in the certificate of internally displaced people, and the person was deprived to have a pension. And it was the only money on which this person lived on. So the person is a hospital and he was deprived to have the money as a pension. Unfortunately, we raised these issues lots of years ago when these issues appeared. It was in 2015, 2016. But since then, nothing was changed, and all these verifications and so on still exist. So if we are talking about the life of Ukrainian controlled territories, so the most problem is related to internally displaced people. And also internally displaced people were deprived to vote on elections, and it was from 2015 till this year. And this year the law was changed, and it was the first time when internally displaced people could took place in local elections. And for this, they had to change their so-called voting address. And it was not hard. Personally, I changed this voting address during 10 minutes. It could be done electronically. So it's not a problem. Now, one of the biggest issues which related to violation of human rights was solved this year. Unfortunately, very few internally displaced people changed their voting address because the law was accepted in summer, and we didn't have enough time for informational campaign for this, but still this right was established, and I think it's a big, really big result and really good. If we are talking about people who live on occupied territories, I would say that there are lots of issues in their relationships with Ukrainian controlled territories. And first of all, it's crossing the this conflict zone, block posts. As our previous expert, as Paul said, that it's really a big issue to cross this border. And when COVID pandemic appeared, it became even harder because Ukrainian block posts closed, and people practically cannot cross these borders. But they have to do this for several reasons. First of all, as I said, some people have to pass verifications to have pensions, and these verifications, they have to pass these verifications each 3 months. Yes, they have to come to Ukrainian controlled territory to have to pass verifications for their pensions. Then we have really bad case this summer with students because lots of people, lots of young people who live on occupied territories, they wanted to enter universities in Ukraine, but they couldn't cross the border in time to pass exams, these tests for entering universities. Government allowed them to, Ukrainian government allowed them to come later and not pass the tests, but pass exams. But again, Ukrainian government communicated, not properly communicated with generally with people about this issue. And in Facebook and social mass media, and even in some official mass media, we got a really big flow of hate for these students, because people said, okay, our people, our children have to pass these tests, and these people who, these separatists children, they can enter university without any test, without any exam, and so on.
So they thought that it was unfair
yes,
compared to Ukraine one.
Yes, it's unfair, but actually, because they didn't realize, the government didn't communicate it properly, that it's not like any person from occupied territory can come and enter university just without any test and exam. They had to pass regular exams, but it wasn't communicated. And now our the members of our organization report that there is a bad situation with the COVID on non-Ukrainian controlled territory and a big deficit of medicines, both medicine support and medicine like pills, the big deficit of antibiotics and other drugs important for treatment of COVID. And also there is an issue, as well as there is an issue with crossing the board from Ukrainian controlled territory, and some people have to cross. They go to Russia and afterwards come to Ukraine through Russian territory, from Russian territory through border with Kharkiv region and so on. And they are penalized by Ukrainian government for them because it's not legal to do this, to go to Russia and afterwards cross the board. So people, civilians who live on non-Ukrainian controlled territory, they really in a bad situation because of this issue.
Okay.
Also, I want
think
to
we
say
can,
that
Svetlana, I think we can thank you for your very, very detailed explanation. I think it raised a lot of questions and we can come back to some topics in the end. So Yuri was a bit disappeared for a while, but do you have something to add in these two very, very detailed presentations?
Well, I appreciate that my colleagues here, they are better positioned to evaluate the situation on the ground because they have, Svetlana is still there and Paul has been there for a while. And of course, as someone who lives in Kiev, right, I get information from open data, and I also have good relations with the Ministry of Reintegration and the leadership of the ministry. So it's for me, it's very useful to hear what both Paul and Svetlana in particular have said, because considering that we have very little information really in our mainstream media, and this is something which is very important for the whole discussion, for a variety of reasons. One of them being, of course, the poor access to the controlled occupied territories. Our journalists don't go there, and we have little information about the situation on the ground, and very often that those pieces of information that we do have, they are usually presented to us through a politicized prism, which means that we do not have the opportunity to understand what is really happening in reality. Because whatever information is given to us, for example, if any of the problems listed by Svetlana, and they are all very important, I can appreciate, I can relate to these problems. I mean, students, people crossing the borders, people who lack housing, internally displaced people. These are real problems of real people, okay? But of course, when politicians talk about them and when they try to explain these issues to their target audiences, of course, they present them in a way which is beneficial to them. So they say, we're doing, for example, Ukrainian government says, oh, we're trying our best, look at the initiatives that we have rolled out, look at the, different projects that we implement to help internally displaced people, to ensure safety on the crossings, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, what we also have to keep in mind that, and this is something that I investigated in my research, of course, there's a universal declaration of human rights. You know, everybody is entitled to these rights, regardless of their race, creed, and religion. And the fact of being internally displaced, of course, does not it should not deprive people of their human rights. On the contrary, uh, the state, the state where these internally displaced people find themselves has an active obligation, an active duty to ensure the protection of the human rights of these people. Now, the reality is such that Ukraine at the moment is, without exaggeration, probably one of the poorest country in Europe. And many, for example, the housing issue. I appreciate that the Ukraine as a government has a duty to provide housing to internally displaced people. But if you think for a moment that it is like 1.5 million internally displaced people, of course, they are dispersed in different parts of Ukraine, okay? Not all of them, you know, and that's a separate issue. But providing housing for 1.5 million people for a poor country like Ukraine, this is not an overnight task. This is not something that can be solved with a magic wand, right? Ukrainian pensioners barely make their living very often, even in central parts of Ukraine. It's very common. So many of the problems that internally displaced people from Donbass region face, they are very common to ordinary Ukrainians, you know, people who were born in Kiev, in central Kiev. You can see people barely making their living, okay? So we have to bear in mind when we try to understand why these problems are not solved. What I encourage everybody to consider seriously is the actual economic potential of the country to meet those needs. And of course, from the point of view of the international human rights protection system, the theory goes that, okay, a state has a duty to protect the human rights of internally displaced people. In those situations where, for objective reasons, a state is unable to meet those needs, this is where the international humanitarian assistance mechanism must at least temporarily replace the state. The international humanitarian community is there to lend a helping hand to countries which are unable to meet their duty to protect the human rights of these internally displaced people.
Yeah.
And which I think is a bridge to our next question, because you know, our next question, if I remember correctly, concerns the role of international organizations in Ukraine, right?
Yes, thank you, Yuri, for making this bridge. That's definitely the second question we wanted to address. But first, thank you about this civilian's perspective, and I think it gives some ideas that we can integrate into our list of recommendations that we will have in the end. So the second topic is about the role of international organizations, which Yuri underlined very well. And the thing I have in mind first is the special monitoring mission by the OSCE that is done, that actually does daily reports. And when I discovered it, I found it very important, and it was very detailed. And I always wondered, how do they do it? And by reading one of Paul's articles about that, the thing that impressed me is that they're really staying and counting the shots, writing it on a paper, and trying to find which side shot on the other. And that's why I think, Paul, you will have a lot of things to say here, and Svetlana as well, because you interact with these people there. And plus, the second sub question is about how do these OSCE observators and any other international missions on the ground implement Minsk agreements. How do they follow it up? So, Paul,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Yeah, I had a strange situation some day in Donetsk. I think it was during the first year of war. I wanted to make my story about OSCE, but I had difficulties to reach them, to have contacts from people in Donetsk, because they were a bit afraid to talk to journalists at this time. So I decided to go to the Donetsk airport, because I knew that they had a post on the roof. I think it was the roof of the railway station, Donetsk railway station, and we had a kind of observation point, but it was very strange. Like, they had a table, 2 chairs and papers, and we had a view on the Donetsk airport, and on the left, Ukrainian army was shooting, on the right, the separatists were shooting, and it was like a tennis match. Like, they were turning their head, it's coming from this side, it's coming from inside, but we were in the middle of that. So it was a kind of dangerous for them. But I also spend a lot of time reading their daily emails about what happened during the day. But we fast had a big problem with this report, is that they were sleeping during the night. Like, these OSCE observers, it was an interesting point. Everyone in Ukrainian or separatist side really hates them at this time. So it was very interesting for me. It was a kind of a point where everyone was agree. The fact that OSCE observers couldn't see everything, and were not seeing everything, because for security reasons, they had to come back to their hotel at one time at the end of the day, before the night came. But the problem is that during a war, most of the shooting and bombs are during the night. So still, they were trying to count from their hotel room, but it's already not filled. And another point is that they have one interesting report. Is a checkpoint installed on the border between Russia and I think, I forgot if it's Donetsk or Lugansk region, but Russia and Donbass, where they are supposed to count all people crossing this border. It's really interesting, because we know that a lot of Russian soldiers came in Donbass. So when we learned about this checkpoint, we were really enthusiastic. We were like, okay, we know more about all these men coming from Russia to fight in Donbass. But then we learned that observers had to stay at their place, like, at their share in this checkpoint, and that 200 or 300 meters further, were a kind of railway. They had the railway. Their train were coming from Russia to Donbass, but they had no possibility, no right to go and check all this train coming to Donbass. So at the end, it was a kind of bit it was useful to know more about civilians going from Donetsk to Russia, and the way the interaction between these two sides. But in a military point of view, it was totally useless, because we had no idea what Russia sent to Ukraine or not. So it was two big critics that people, civilians, politicians, soldiers made to OSCE. Then they tried to improve their covering of the situation. So they installed some cameras on the field to be able to see the shoots during the night, and then in the morning they were going on the place of a shoot to check who fired it, at which time, and try to make more observations. But then still, it's OSCE, so they are just here to observe. And even me as a journalist, we are talking a lot about that with my colleagues. We are really angry against OSCE, because they have a lot of people on the field. Like, there is no redaction able to send that amount of journalists on the field. So they are not journalists, but they are observers, and they are a lot on the field. But then you read their report, and they are not giving names. Like, we saw a shot from the west to the east. but it seems like it came from the separatist side and shoot in Ukraine side, or the opposite. But they will never say it's the separatists shooted on this place or Ukrainian army shooted. So for us, it's really frustrating because they were so. The OSCE is a really important point of a Minsk agreement, and the observations is really important for the resolution of a conflict. And this is the limit of their observations, that they don't want to give names or to try to explain who is shooting on who, just because then it becomes political. And if it's political, one side or another will say, okay, OSCE is for Russia or OSCE is for Ukraine, and then they will have to leave the front line. So
lose the mandate then.
Yeah, exactly. So I always agreed that the most important is that they are here, even if they don't observe everything. They sometimes don't see a lot of things. Still, they are on the field. It's a kind of like peacekeeper position. But yes, then you can judge by their efficiency or not. And I just want to say a few words about what we talked before, because Svilana is right. I forgot to talk about the problem of pensions and people who had to cross the front line to take their money. And I think the city of Stanitsa Lugansk is one of the city I visited last time. It's a place where people are crossing to Ukraine and Donetsk. Was a good example of what OSCE, humanitarian organization, politicians had to make to restore kind of to solve solutions on the front line, because a lot of problems were on this place. A bridge was destroyed, so it was really difficult for people to cross, really difficult and dangerous also, because a lot of fights were still going on really late in this area. And so politicians, NGOs, OSCE had all to think about a way to improve the situation. I don't know what some of my colleagues, Ukrainian colleagues, think about the situation there now, but last time I was there, I saw that the situation improved. We improved a bit the security of people who cross the front line. We installed ATM on this place. There is some places where you can buy food. And you can some tent to not keep cold, catch cold during the winter. So we improved a bit the situation. And I also want to say a last word about the fact, something I understood the last time I was in Donbass, is it's the fact I met some politicians, some local politicians there, and I understood a big difficulties that Ukraine especially can have in this area, is the way that they just can't rebuild or fix roads, bridge, of this kind of things that were destroying the world. They can't do it because the money will not come if there is still a risk that the conflict explodes or come again. And it's a kind of abuse, but they will not build a bridge if there is a possibility that this bridge will be destroyed 2 months later. So it's a big issue in Donbass now that there is money. Not all the money politicians would like, but there is some money ready to invest in Donbass to fix roads or this kind of things, but they just can't use that because the situation is still not fixed.
Thank you, Paul. I'll ask Svetlana and Yuri to make it as short as possible.
Yeah, sorry.
So, no, it's okay. So we can have time to address the third point and also to get some questions from the audience. Svetlana. Your mic.
Unfortunately, if we are talking about Minsk agreement, Minsk process, unfortunately, it's stuck. And the journalists we work with, some of them war journalists who practically always in conflict zone, they report that it's always violating of silence from the side of non-Ukrainian controlled territories. And it gives the right to nationalistically thinking people in Ukraine, press on the government of Ukraine, not to observe this silence also, not to prolong process of peace building and so on. And if for me, it's very upsetting because it sounds like this conflict will not be solved one day, and it will last forever.
Thank you, Svetlana. Yuri, you have something to add? Same in Mike.
Just a few words. So if you look at the number of international organizations which are involved in the humanitarian effort in Donbass, it's pretty impressive, right? Different UN agencies, World Bank, OSCE, the Committee of Red Cross, everybody's trying to help, whichever way they can. OSCE, of course, is on the ground as a monitoring mission. But what we have to understand is that, and I agree here with Svetlana, is that these are all palliative measures, and these are all measures which are designed to help people suffering from this conflict on the ground temporarily. This cannot go on forever, because there is the so-called phenomenon of the international humanitarian community's fatigue, right? So there comes a moment where everybody's tired, the budgets are depleted, the problem is too protracted, and then everybody kind of is tempted to give up, and the conflict gets frozen. If you consider that this situation in the eastern Ukraine is already going on for 6 years now, for a moment, it's a long period of time, and the resolution is nowhere in sight. So the only way out is, of course, a long-term solution to the conflict, and we all understand what it is. Ukraine is a sovereign country. The occupied territories are part of our territory. It must be returned. It must return back to Ukraine. I mean, it's non-negotiable. Now, how do we do that? That's a difficult one, because if you, in our search for the solution, we have to understand the origin. Now, I want everybody present in this discussion to understand that this is not what happened in Donbass region is not a freedom fighting scenario in a conventional sense. Donbass region is not similar to, I don't know, Northern Ireland, the Basque country, even like South Ossetia, Donbass region was part of Ukraine, and before that part of Ukrainian SSR, and it never demonstrated any separatist desires. The people of Donbass are Ukrainians, and this whole thing happened overnight and came as a huge shock, exactly because we never suspected. Of course, we knew that they are more lenient, they're more kind of pro-Russian, simply because they are nearer to Russia. Okay, it's natural that people who live in that part of Ukraine have closer ties even like family ties with Russia and so on and so forth. But it's not a case when, you know, there is a history of freedom fighting. There's a history of people striving for independence from the metropolis, right? This is not like an anti-colonial movement. Donbas region for a long time was, forever was part of, not forever was part of Ukraine, but was, so what I'm trying to say that this is an artificial separatist scenario, okay? This is not a natural kind of thing that has a history, development, and then it came to a peak, and then they broke out. Donbas region is not a breakaway republic. It has never been. And my conclusion is that, and I encourage everybody to think about the origins. If this is not a case of a separatist movement, then what is it? How was it made possible? And I assure you in one thing, and I'm pretty certain that everybody present in this discussion will agree. You know, if you have a flower, that flower needs water. If you stop watering the flower disappears. So this whole scenario, the water in this case is the support of the Russian Federation. It all began with the support of the Russian Federation for the brothers and sisters, and it will only. I understand how unrealistic it may sound at this stage, but the moment Russian Federation stops meddling and stops supporting Donbas region, that's when we will begin to have an opportunity for a long-term solution to this scenario. And no international organization will be able to help. This is not something which international community can handle. International community, in many respects, is unable to handle these cases. Look at what's happening in Nagorno-Karabakh at the moment. 30 years of a frozen conflict overnight broke out. In 1 month of the conflict, 6,000 people died. Where was the international community? Where was the UN? Where was everybody else? So we have to be realistic about what the international organizations can do and what they cannot do. And they have to be good at what they are good at, but they have to at the same time call on the participants of the parties to the conflict. They have to put pressure on these parties to look for a long-term solution.
Mm-hmm. Sure, and I agree with you on the role of international organizations, and Paul also highlighted that they can just handle the consequences of the problem. So the humanitarian side try to set a dialogue, set humanitarian help on the ground, but not solving actually the conflict, because as far OSCE is also always seeking a balance in its positions, and so they cannot take any side, otherwise they will just lose this mandate, and we won't have any relevant information from what's happening there. So I agree that parties of the conflict must do it somehow by their own, and international organizations are here to make sure it's done in a proper way, maybe, or in a less harmful way, I would say. So it was a very interesting part of the discussion, and it also makes a bridge for the third one, which I will ask also to be short. So we have a discussion in the end. Is about the war of information. So Paul, when we discussed before, you mentioned that some territories are not accessible to Western journalists, and so we cannot see what's happening there. Plus, some parts of the eastern Ukraine are only reached by Russian media and not by Ukrainian. And I read an article a few days ago about the fact that Ukrainians were building an antenne, to make sure that Ukrainian media also provide information in this region. So Paul, can you tell us more about that?
Yes, the situation is a bit strange, but just know that there is one French woman working in Donetsk with a separatist who have the possibility, who decide if Western European journalists, French speaking most of the time, can come or not in the separatist area. Just one woman, she has colleagues dealing with American and English colleagues. But for French-speaking journalists, it's one woman with like nobody, just a girl who decided someday to go to Donetsk and to work for the separatists. So the main difficulty for us is that I can, and I'm lucky because it was not obvious, but because I live in Russia now, but I still can work in Ukraine, in Ukrainian side. Last time I even had spent some time with Ukrainian army who accepted to welcome me, but I can't cross the border and I can't go to Donetsk. Maybe I could do it legally from Russia. I don't want to do that. And anyway, in Donetsk, I would have problem with the separatists then. So you really gave the example of Nagorno-Karabakh. It's a good example of, I think, could happen later if we don't talk or try to find solution about the issue of access of all this area by journalists. Because when you go in Azerbaijan or Armenia now, I don't want, okay, it's a general point of view, but if you talk to people, most of the time they will be like really angry. They will be like, yes, I want to kill the guy on the other side of the front line. But if you go in Donbass now, when you meet people, last time I was there, I was in Avdiivka, so you can even see the Donetsk airport and the Donetsk buildings from Avdiivka in Ukrainian side, Ukrainian controlled side. When you talk to people there, they are like, yeah, I've got some people of my family in Donetsk, like everything is normal, like they talk each other, they have contact, they don't hate each other. Obviously, if you talk about Russia, you can hear more radical positions, but most of the time they still continue to talk all each other. But propaganda is really hard, and I will try to be fast, but I just want to remember that my first time in Donetsk, when it was few days before the war began, the separatists took control of the regional administration in Donetsk, and the first thing they installed in front of this building, it was barricades, but then it was a big TV screen. And on this big TV screen, they were broadcasting Russia 24, it's Russia 24. It's one of the biggest federal TV channel in Russia. And some people, especially babushki, for some reasons, were spending their days in front of this TV watching Russian propaganda, because it was huge propaganda at this time. And then they were catching European journalists in the streets repeating what they heard on TV. So I understood at this time the power of the propaganda in the conflict zone, because some minds were totally stormed by this propaganda. And now you have one side with huge Russian and separatist propaganda, another side with more I think there is more different point of view in Ukrainian side, but still there is pro-Ukrainian propaganda too. And it's just like two sides who fight each other. And at the end, people on the field, they just don't have the possibility to talk to journalists. They have no voice in medias, international media or Russian media or Ukrainian medias. And I think, maybe it's because I'm a journalist, but I think it's a big issue. And actually, I don't understand why this issue was not inside the Minsk agreement, because for me, the access of this area, Russian journalists in Ukraine, Ukrainian journalists in DNR, LNR, so-called LNR, DNR controlled area, the access of journalists should be like obvious for the future of this conflict.
Thank you, Paul. And the issue you raise about the fact that it should have been integrated into the Minsk agreements, because think everyone is now pretty much aware of the power of information in every conflict. So I hope that it gives our participants some ideas for the work of this afternoon. Svetlana, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I totally agree with Paul about propaganda. And I totally agree with Yuri, who previously said that this situation started from nothing. There were no real reasons for any movement, any separatist or any other movement in Donetsk region. As you said when you introduced me, I'm from Donetsk, and our organization was situated in Donetsk, and all this situation which happened, everything what happened, it happened in front of my eyes. Yeah, propaganda was terrible. It was insane. It dehumanized Ukraine in eyes of people of Donetsk region. It did lots of bad things. But it's Russian propaganda and everything is clear with it. It's bad. But unfortunately, what was also bad, it's a response of Ukraine to Russian propaganda. And I think that the deepness of this conflict, deepness of this conflict now is also responsibility of Ukrainian mass media as well as Russian mass media. Because Russian propaganda depicted something in certain way. And you know what Ukrainian mass media did? They depicted the same issue with different sign. For example, Russian propaganda said, these people did this and they are good. And Ukrainian mass media said, these people did this and they are bad. But actually, these people didn't do anything, you know. And this is the biggest issue of Ukrainian mass media, which still exists, and which still we are trying to fight this this attitude of Ukrainian mass media. And also we work closely with German partners, and we bring Ukrainian journalists to Germany. We brought Ukrainian journalists last year in Germany, which last year it was 30 years of fall of the wall between western and eastern part of Germany, and we got lots of insights. For example, we were said that during our communication with the German mass media, we were said that when this separation of Germany to Germany happened, the chancellor of Western Germany was Konrad Adenauer, and he gathered all owners of mass media, editors of mass media, and he said, you should never ever say any bad word about such territories, about these people, because they are our brothers and sisters, but in hard situation. That's it. And Western German mass media always supported any movement of Eastern German people, movement towards Western Germany, movement towards human rights, and so on. But what happened to Eastern Germany? They always called Western Germans fascists. You know, they built this wall, and they called this anti-fascist wall. And what happened? The wall was destroyed, and the wall was destroyed by people and by goodwill of people who wanted to join to each other, who understood that it's propaganda and so on. And what's happening in Ukraine, what happened from the very beginning of this conflict. In 2014, July, first IDPs just appeared, and Ukrainian mass media started to blame IDPs in various things, depict them like separatists, depict them like bad people, and so on and so on. And unfortunately, lots of bad messages came not only from Ukrainian mass media, but from Ukrainian government, previous government. For example, previous Minister of Social Affairs called Ukraine pensioners which lived on occupied territories, he called them bastards. And other Ukrainian governmental officials give names to IDPs, to people who live on occupied territories, and so on. When government changed in 2019, we put lots of hopes that attitude will change, because this attitude, it separates territories more than any weapons. And unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago or a week ago, I heard the interview which Vice President of Integration Reznikov gave to Yanina Sokolova, and he again called this territory like a cancer. He said, shall we cut these territories like a cancer from our body, or we shall? It's terrible, guys. Ukraine lost informational battle, lost this informational war totally, and the fall of this, it's not only Russian propaganda. It's the absence of normal policy of Ukrainian government to this territory, its absence of informational policy. It's just really, if it lasts longer, I think we will lose this territory, and it will be not because only because of Russia.
Thank you, Svetlana. It's a very interesting point that you raised, and maybe that would underline the role of sorry, not underline, highlight the role of French, German, and Western, and not only Western countries media to give a more objective point of view on the territory. So that's why that's something we should really speak up about, is the access of journalists in these regions. Thank you, Svetlana. Yuri, the last word is yours.
Well, I would like to bring it down to a very personal level. So consider me. I'm a Ukrainian patriot. In 2013 and 2014, I was an active participant of the Revolution of Dignity. I stood there at minus 20 degrees Celsius with my friends. And when I stood there, nobody paid me. I went there on my own volition. And I went there because I wanted a better future for my country. And I wanted a better future for my country at that time, of course, a country which included Crimea, which included Donbass. I wanted a better future for the whole of Ukraine, right? So for me, this is very important and a very sensitive issue. So what happens next is I see, for example, in 2014, I see images on television of people in Donbass region, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, stepping on my flag, on our flag, on a Ukrainian flag, spitting on our flag, calling me a Nazi, calling me a fascist. So the question is, I understand as a mature adult that for us to reach a resolution of this situation, we need to be very forgiving. We need to be very forgiving because propaganda is one thing, but we need to understand that if you just forget about propaganda for a little while, things have happened on both sides. Bad things have happened. People have died. Relatives have lost their fathers, their brothers, their sons on both sides. There is a huge degree of, at this stage, because before 2014, this was artificial, it was non-existent. Right now, 6 years after, there is a huge level of natural, based on facts and animosity. We have become enemies of each other, naturally, because we have been killing each other, literally with guns. So what I'm trying to get at is this. If you go to any average family therapist, and if you tell him, look, I have a problem in my marriage, I need counsel, I need help. The family therapist will tell you the first thing they always do, I know because I've done some family therapy in my own experience, but they always tell you that if you are really interested in repairing your relationships, you really want to repair it, not to further aggravate it. So that's rule number one. Both parties need to wish to put an end to this. This is criteria number one, because if this is real, then no amount of propaganda will achieve its goal. Take it from me, because I live in Kiev. We have unlimited access to internet. You can watch whatever you like. You can watch Russian TV, you can watch Ukrainian TV, there's no limits. And still, in Kiev, you have who want to be pro-Russian and love Putin, and the recent results of local elections are proof to that. Number one guy who is running for the mayor of this capital of Ukraine now is a representative of a party which is pro-Russian. The head of that party, just so that you understand the magnitude of the situation, the head of that party, 2 weeks before the local elections, sat at the table with Mr. Putin in Moscow and talked to him as to a friend. He was very friendly to him. They were talking about their common future plans and stuff like that. And this is Kiev. So what I'm trying to say is this, we have to be careful with propaganda. We have to allow access to journalists because truth is the only way forward. But at the same time, everybody involved, we have to rethink our narrative. We have to understand that the narrative should be about forgiveness and should be about future. We have to stop calling each other names. We have to stop calling each other fascists or separatists. We have to start calling each other again one people. And this goes to every freaking media on both sides. I'm a patriot, but sometimes when I read Ukrainian media, a cup in the screen, because I can see how they are manipulating. I can see that everybody is manipulating. And how do you expect a reconciliation to happen when everybody is lying? Everybody is in pursuit of political objectives. This is not a way forward. So we need to stop the blame game. Everybody is at blame. Everybody is at this stage guilty. We have to understand this. This is not a case where, and going back to the family therapy analogy, like the therapist will tell you, the moment you start blaming each other during a session, that's it. You can just as well go and not waste your money on therapy. You have to really understand that this process is about forgiveness. This process is about listening to each other. This process is about respect for each other. And not saying that, yes, we are different, but hey, many countries. You get the United States of America. There are Mexicans, Italians, Jews, whoever, but they're one political nation. And Ukraine has to aspire to become a united political nation. Prices different, speak different languages, but they all want the same thing for each other. Good future for their children, no war for their children. And for this, the role of media, of course, is crucial. Media has to take the lead in stopping the blame game, in stopping the the calling names thing, and they have to start having these polarized parts of the same people coming together, not further fanning the flames of hatred and animosity.
Thank you, Yuri. And I think you really you gave an excellent sum up of our discussion, meaning that the role of the states, both states, on how they manipulate the parts for their own interests, and now it shows that civil society, so media, with Paul, Svetlana, with NGOs, and you, Yuri, from maybe the business perspective, if I'm not mistaken, we should speak up and tell to our states that there's something to be changed in the way the conflict is addressed. So thank you to all of you. It was for me, it was very interesting, and I guess for the participants too. We have I guess we have 30 minutes until the next break. So I'll open the possibility to participants to ask questions. Let's do it. So I see Celine, you have a question, please.
Yes. First of all, thank you to all of you for the presentations and answering the questions. I thought it was very insightful, the different perspectives also. And my question is, do you think that maybe some of the anti-Ukraine ressentiment or the wish to be more assimilated to Russia comes from the fact that Ukraine has partaken some efforts to assimilate this population more into Ukraine, or for example, due to the efforts they made to prohibit the speaking of the Russian language?
Thank you, Celine. And I'm sorry.
Can I go first?
I will just
maybe
gather.
Maybe I can answer like a person. I am a person who Russian can protect.
Just Svetlana, 1 second.
So I can answer this question, you know.
Great. I will just gather 2 more questions, so we make like question. We can gather more questions actually. So then, Misha, I think you had one question as well.
Yeah.
So the first was about assimilation and French language.
Yes, yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Mikhail Polyansky. I'm coordinator of the forum. Thank you a lot for 3 speakers on a very insightful, very interesting presentation. But my question will probably gonna go to Yuri, because I think you mentioned a pretty interesting topic, and you mentioned family therapy and the process that Russia and Ukraine are going through. I'm also in my research, I'm a PhD student in Frankfurt, and sometimes it just really comes across as this process between Russia and Ukraine as a divorce of sorts. And if we kind of think of this process as a divorce, what is the aim of Ukraine in this divorce, so to say? Because the impression that I get is that Ukraine wants kind of a divorce check, like Russia and Ukraine had an apartment, let's say, and then emotions kind of went through the roof, they don't talk to each other, and then after 6 years there is some kind of a cool down. Okay, we have to talk, we have to kind of divide all material stuff that we've had through all the years. And I get the impression that Ukraine wants a divorce check. Let's do this, and we go our way. We go to Europe, and you do whatever, you go to China or whatever. So would you kind of share this idea that this is what Ukraine is trying to achieve there? Thank you.
Thank you, Misha. And we continue the analogy with family therapy and all this stuff. I will take a last question for this first session. Baptiste, please.
Yes. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, and I would have a question for all of you. As I understood, you are all you all know the topic, and you went in the Donbas region. And I would like to know if you believe that this separatist revolution was supported by the people of the region, because there were so many displaced people in the end that we can consider in some way that in fact it was very instrumentalized and it was not supported by the population. So what do you believe about that?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Baptiste. Let's do as we did before. So Paul, Svetlana, and then Yuri, and you just answer to the questions you can answer. Paul.
Okay, so I'm the person who Russia can protect. I'm a Russian-speaking person. And I want to say that nobody violated our rights to speak Russian. It's true. All Donetsk region spoke Russian freely. We even had the local regional law that all documentation can be processed in Russian. In Ukraine, all the documentation must be processed in Ukraine, but for Donetsk region, it was exception. So there were no real ground for this. Nobody oppressed us. And also answering the next question, I want to say that when this situation happened, lots of people from Donetsk came to demonstrations for Ukraine. We got the biggest Ukrainian flag in history. Like putting it on the head of people, like through all the square, a huge square, and demonstrated the support to like Donetsk with Ukraine and so on, Donbas with Ukraine. But it happened once. Next time when we wanted to, we came several times for such kind of huge meetings. First meeting was gathered 13,000 people. And the next time we we came to this meeting, and appeared people who was brought in buses with Russian numbers. And it was people like males from 25 to 45 years. And they took weapons like bats or knives. And they started to throw stones to people. And our activists started to protect the people and stay in line. And one person was killed. It's one person from, it's like a member of so-called Heaven Sotnya, hundreds, Heaven hundreds. Okay, so all these escalations were brought from our neighbor. There was some support from seniors to joining Russia, and there was a big support from police. You know that what happened to Maidan when police Berkut was beaten and so on, and police felt like a sort of that they support these people who were beaten at Maidan, and they were open in their decisions. Our organization was a member of civil council at Ministry of Internal Affairs at that time. And we gathered the civil council and talked to the general who was the head of Ministry of Foreign Affairs department, regional department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And we said, we see lots of Russian males all around the Donetsk region, all the hostels, working hostels, student hostels, cheap hotels are full of these people. Why don't you move them from the region? Because they killed a person, they did bad things here. And they said, but we do not have any law for this. Russians are allowed to come to Ukraine without international passports. What did they do? They just live peacefully in their hostels and so on. And we said, okay, and he said, maybe if it would be decision of a court, maybe we could do something take measures based on decision of a court. And we said, okay, let's organize a court. And the court was supposed to be provided at 6 o'clock p.m., but at 4 p.m. the court was occupied. So the things goes so fast that actually we couldn't take any measures as activists and so on. So my answer no to this, the first and to third questions. Practically there were no support of this movement, and there were no ground to this movement. And also I want to pay attention to Yuri, to my words, because Yuri looks like a victim of Russian propaganda as well, because he saw that he said that he saw like some people stepped on Ukrainian flag, but he never seen, as far as I understood, how people brought the biggest in Ukraine flag.
I have.
13,000 people came, like they fought for Ukraine, and they didn't have support from Ukraine, by the way.
I have, and Svetlana, trust me, I mentioned that incident with people stepping on the flag just because I needed to give an example of my emotions. But I have seen the biggest demonstration in Donetsk. In fact, some of my friends participated in that demonstration. So I want you to understand that I'm trying to be, objective and to illustrate my suggestion. Even in discussions like this, you shouldn't be tempted to call anyone, me or anybody else, a victim of Russian propaganda. Because the moment you do that, you start dividing us, you and me, and we want to be on the same side of this story, right? So victim, I'm not a victim, and you are not a victim. We are in this as partners, and that's how we should proceed from now on, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Let's continue the family therapy then.
Yeah, the family therapy is going in full swing. So when people separate, there are two basic scenarios. There's a good one and there's a bad one. There's a healthy divorce and there's a toxic divorce. I have friends who have gone through a divorce, and 7-8 years after the divorce, they're still at loggerheads with their ex-spouses, right? They still kind of toxic to each other. They still have differences, and you ask them, are you crazy guys? You should have moved on a long time ago. I mean, come on, you've been living separately for like almost a decade now, and you're still poisoning each other's lives. So that's a toxic, a bad one. A good one is where two mature adults separate, they go their own ways, they set up their new family lives, they respect each other, they invite each other to their kids' birthdays and stuff like that. So that's a good one. Now, with Russia, unfortunately, Ukraine is in a bad one, right? We've separated like a long time ago. We've said long time ago that, look, thank you very much. You've been kind to us for a while. Now we want to go our own way. We want to be able to decide for ourselves who do we meet, on what terms, and so on and so forth. But Russia just cannot take that. Russia is that spouse, is that husband or wife, which is just, no, you are not going to live without me. You are unable to live without me. You're nothing without me. If you look at Russian television, and I watch Russian television a lot, right? Because I want to understand how their minds work. So, of course, there are different people in Russia, and I don't want to break my own rules and kind of descend into name calling and stuff like that. But one thing which is for sure is that the narrative promoted by the Russian elites who are aligned with Kremlin, okay, then that narrative is that Ukraine is not a nation. Ukrainians are not a separate people. Ukrainians are not capable of their own statehood. Ukrainians are a historic part of Russia. Mr. Putin has himself said a number of times that the breakup of the Soviet Union was the biggest mistake that happened in Russian history, that Ukrainians is not a separate people, we are one people with common history, common traditions, blah, blah, blah. Even if that is so, to an extent, as a Ukrainian, I would like them to just leave us alone. Just freaking leave us alone. We will decide ourselves where to live, who to live with, and so on and so forth. This, unfortunately, is not happening now. And it's very difficult to be neighbors with somebody who denies your existence. They tell me that I'm not Ukrainian. They tell me very often that my language does not exist. They tell me that my nation has no history of its own. That's a very difficult one to digest, to be honest.
Sure, and but I think today we are a bit further from this narrative. It was really, quite widely used in Russian media at the beginning, but I'm not sure that it's really relevant today. And plus,
I watched mainstream Russian television yesterday, and I heard it there. It's not gone anywhere. They are still convinced that Ukraine should be part of Russian, at least sphere of influence, if not an administrative unit.
Mhm. Okay, Misha, just 1 second for you, and then we will give the word to Paul.
Thank you very much, Yuri, for your input. But I would agree with you that this is the current narrative. But whether Ukraine should remain like that, I'm not sure. You probably seen the most recent interview with Vladislav Surkov, the former kind of envoy to Ukrainian issues. He said, "Yeah, it is not yet, but the Ukrainians are really stubborn, guys. They will do it." He didn't say when exactly Ukraine will do it, but they will do it. So I think Russia is trying to kind of live with this idea already that Ukrainians do exist, the Ukrainian language does exist, the Ukrainian nationality will exist in the foreseeable future. I think,
like I said, Russia is 160 million people. There are different views, but the dominant official party line narrative is unconstructive. It's unconstructive.
Okay. So, Paul, if you remember the questions, there were one question about assimilation, then about Russia, Ukraine, divorce, and so on, and about the fact about whether separatists ideas were supported by people there.
I agree that the question is of a relationship between Russia and Ukraine is more about a toxic relationship than a divorce, because Russia doesn't really care about the fact that Ukraine stays like Yanukovych Ukraine or change or not. The main point for Putin, for Russia, is to keep influence on his neighbors. So we can see that a lot with Belarus now. We can see that in a lot of countries around Russia. And that's the main goal. And that's, Yuri is right. I'm also, as I'm correspondent in Moscow, I'm also watching a lot Russian media and TV especially. And they are not representative of what people are thinking, but still, he's right. They are really violent. And sometimes you don't even understand why they talk about Ukraine. Like when there is big news everywhere in the world, they still will say something about Ukraine. Like you don't really know why, but they will say something. Most of the time, they will insult even Ukraine in their report. For some reasons, I still don't understand. And one of the mystery for me, because I'm watching these medias, because these medias shows a lot about what Russia wants to do, what Russia thinks, Russian government thinks about Ukraine in this situation. So in a diplomatic point of view, we can learn a lot from these medias. And sometimes I'm in a position where I can meet some Russian officials because there's still this question I've got in mind. where I don't know if they really believe what they say on TV, or if it's just communication to push people to follow and support them. And to be honest, I think more and more that after 6 years of repeating the same thing, I think they believe in that. And I think it's not just a strategy. I think they believe they still talk about Ukraine like it's our little brother. We have to be really close. Ukraine can't leave Russian influence. We can debate a lot about that, but still, it's something a Russian official really thinks. And in the way of solving of this problem, situation, conflict in Donbass, we have to talk about Russia because it's a big actor, it's an important actor, and maybe the solution is even in Moscow, or it's also a lot in Ukraine, but it's maybe more in Moscow than in Berlin or Paris. So
it's in Moscow. It is in Moscow.
Okay, I try to stay diplomatic, but I also think it's in Moscow. but yeah, it's really difficult to talk about that because it means talking about Russian politics, policy, about how Putin is acting. So when you talk about politics, it's really difficult to be heard by everyone. So I wanted just to say something fast, and I was not fast, and so I will try to be fast on the question of a separatist, are they support or not. I noticed an interesting thing in Donbass. It's that the way people were supported the separatist so-called government during all these 6 years really evolved in the time. First, no, Svetlana will tell us if I'm right or not, but I think one of the arguments to organize all this mess in Donbass, let's say it like that, was to explain to people, maybe you will be integrated to Russia, you will earn more money in Russia. And I remember policemen in Donetsk at this time, they were thinking that they will earn more money if they become a Russian policeman instead of Ukrainian policemen. And so all people had this kind of dream, actually, not all, I don't know, but a lot of people had this kind of goal or dream to be closer to Russia and to enjoy Russians rubles, or I don't know how to say that.
Welfare.
Yeah, even because that's right, that Donbass was a bit forgotten by Kiev, so they were expecting more money coming from Moscow and improving their daily life. And then they had a time where they were really disappointed when they understood that Russia will not take Donbass to Russia. And at this time, I remember when I met people, they were watching, they were still in basement and they were watching DNR TV or something like that. I forgot the name. But still, we were thinking like, okay, we are not really sure. We really want to follow the separatists. We wanted Russia, but we understood that it's not going to happen. And then last time I was in Donbass, so I was in Ukrainian side. But in Ukrainian side, they were all saying, okay, we just don't care about everything. Let's stay in Ukraine. And we have our family living in Donetsk. We just want to be able to cross the front line and to go back to Donetsk, to come back to our village then. And we just want to have a normal life. And then in the train back to Moscow, to Kiev, I met a woman living in the Lugansk region, if I remember well. And she told me a lot about her life in the Lugansk region. And I understood that life is really difficult for them, that there is no justice, that sometimes police can come to your place and just arrest you. And actually there is death penalty in DNR, LNR. And prices are really expensive. A lot of humanitarian food is in fact sold in Donetsk. So I don't know who, but someone catch the humanitarian food and then sell it in supermarket. So I understood that the situation is really hard and that the main point for people is just to have a normal life and to come back to a normal situation. So I think it's the most important to understand this conflict.
Thank you, Paul. We have time for another round of questions. I see Maria for Mina, right? You had one?
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much for the interesting discussion. And I think that the analogy with family therapy is really hilarious, and it's very interesting to further think about it. Yeah, I have another question, and it's, I think, more, it's kind of to Svetlana. It's about IDPs, and as you said, IDPs are a big problem, and you as well said that nothing has changed since 2015-16, and also Yuri said that Ukraine is a poor country and it's not very easy to deal with IDPs. My question is, first of all, so what should be done differently, and secondly, what is the role of humanitarian organizations? Like, are they working, international humanitarian organizations? And yeah, like what should be done? Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. I'll just check whether there are other questions from the audience. I don't see anything in the chat. Maybe here you can just unmute and ask.
Excuse me, I have a question.
Sure.
What do you think about the criminality in the non-controlled area? Is it a factor of that allows that prevents, the crisis from a solution? Thank you.
Thank you, Evgeny, about criminality. Another one, you have some time for that. Okay, no, great. So Svetlana, you started responding.
Okay. What could be done differently? I think that the statement that Ukraine is a poor country and that's why 1.5 million people should live alone with their problems. It's not like a solution of the problem. Our organization, as well as numerous of other organizations, proposed lots of solutions. For example, if we are talking about housing, it could be cheap mortgages for governmental from governmental banks, from state banks, and it could solve lots of problems. And also we have so-called youth housing program, and the program like this has already been organized for IDPs, but where 50% of it's also mortgage, but 50% of mortgage is covered by government. But unfortunately for this year, for next year, in state budget, there is no money for this program. So what I mean that it's not the point of only a point of governmental money. People want to have mortgages. People want to have various programs when they can cover part of the housing, and also people can build the buildings by themselves, but government can provide place, land for these buildings, and so on. So there are lots and lots of solutions. Now we are preparing a big document for the government, and we have already got the work group with Kiev region, Kiev city administration, Kiev regional administration, with the Ministry of Infrastructure, and so on. We hope that this program will be accepted. We are talking about housing. If we are talking about pensions, It's just very simple solution. There is one of human rights are based. All the Ukraine can do just cancel this statement. That's it. One regulation. So cancel this regulation and people will live normally. So we do not want any privileges here. We just want the rights of IDPs will be the same like rights of any other people from Ukraine, any other receivers of social welfare. Because, you know, pension is a property of person. According to any law, Ukrainian law, international law, pension is a property. And take the property away from the person, it's insane. That's it.
Thank you, Svetlana. Paul, maybe you can answer Yevgeny's question about criminality there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah,
I'm sure I understood well the question actually. So if you
about coronavirus, it's actually
it was about the criminality.
The point of government of occupied territories, and also it's a point of that people deprived the rights to cross the borders because usually they brought lots of medicines as food and so on from Ukraine, but now they cannot go to Ukraine, and so it's an issue.
Okay. Paul, about criminality, for instance, do you have something to say? Otherwise, we have two other questions before it ends.
So I didn't get exactly the questions, but about criminality in Donetsk, just know that they are dealing with that in a kind of a far west way. And that's also actually unfair for people living there because it can be really dangerous to just have a pro-Ukrainian position or to, I don't know, to you steal something in the supermarket. I think you can have more problems in separatist controlled side than in Ukrainian controlled side. And there is the using of torture of some prison have been built like non-officially prisons. We had this kind of situation in Ukrainian side at the beginning of the conflict, but now it's the way the things are working in Donetsk. It's like a kind of far west. The faster answer.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Again, I guess I hope it answered your question. Yes, thank you. Two more questions. We had Beatrice, and there is another one from Maria. Beatrice, please.
Okay, I hope that you can listen me. Listen to me. Okay. I've got the question to Paul Gogo. I would like to know how it is to be a reporter on the ground. So how do you gain access to the area? Because you said that the access is sometimes very restricted or even forbidden because of the forces in the war zone. And so I would like just to get a short overview about the process. So how do you reach the area itself?
Thank you, Beatrice. Maria, please.
Yes. So it's a little bit about future prediction, and I would like to know what you think. So because the conflict is already there for 6 years, and I just wonder whether this conflict has the quality to become a protracted, long-term conflict. And maybe it's not a very good question to talk about, okay, future predictions, but still, what is your feeling? What do you think will be there in the future?
Thank you, Maria. And actually, it's a good question for conclusion. So I will ask Paul to answer Beatrice's question and then to use Maria's question as a conclusion for your part, and then to Svetlana and to Yuri.
So I would try to be fast about the access of the area. first, it was a general Far West, actually, at the beginning of the war in Ukrainian and separatist side. So it was pretty easy for us. My first time in Donetsk, we could even go there by train, crossing the front line by train. And now Ukrainian army organized herself to welcome journalists. It's also part of a reaction of a communication informational war. So you have different access possible. Like I forgot exactly, but there's different colors on the map, and you have to ask an authorization to the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine to come closer to the front line. And last time I came, I just called kind of press attaché of the Ukrainian army, and then they welcome me and they show me the front line. The problem is that they show me soldiers without Kalashnikov, without anything, because I think they wanted to show me that they respect the Minsk agreement. But before I was going to the front line in a less official way. The best entrance to the front line, they were volunteers before. So we were following volunteers who were bringing us on the front line. And then I could spend like 5 or 6 days living with soldiers. It was sometimes a bit complicated because soldiers didn't want that their boss or the military police discovered that there is journalist on the place. So sometimes we had, I remember we had to escape, to hide, and in their room sometimes when the boss was in the area. And another time where Ukrainian soldiers commit suicide, and military police came on the base to investigate. So they asked us to leave because they were afraid that this would make them angry to know that the foreign journalists are here. But at the end, it's sometimes complicated, but still possible to work in Ukrainian side. And especially because people from Donbass are really nice. So if you are lost, you just ask someone and he will call some friend. And last time in Avdiivka, they find me a flat in 20 minutes, like my taxi driver just called some friends, and everything is working like that in Donbass. If I can just answer, trying to answer fast to the second question about the future. The problem is that, like in every conflict, there is also a question of internal policy, and especially when there is election, everything is frozen. So when you have a presidential election in Russia, the resolution of a conflict is frozen. When it's in Ukraine, it's frozen for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 months is the time of the election. And now there is COVID, and it's a kind of frozen, like negotiations are going on, but at the level of president, it's really hard to talk about that now. And I'm afraid that more of the internal situation in Russia will be complicated. More it will be frozen because the situation in Russia is not that good now. The economical situation is pretty bad, actually. There is more and more opposition to Vladimir Putin, even if it's not that huge, but more and more. And the future of Vladimir Putin is not that obvious. Like, we don't really know what's going to happen in Russia in the next few years. And I think it could be or good or bad from Donbass, but I think the first consequences will be to maybe even make the negotiation going slower and slower. So yeah, we will see.
Thank you, Paul. And just Svetlana and Yuri, I will ask you to make your conclusion in 1 minute, because we are a little bit...
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You had 2 questions. So yeah, your conclusion, and also if you could, but maybe after the discussion, share with us, you can send it by email, some readings, articles, or anything participants could read about the conflict, any source that you find relevant. You can share it with us, and we will forward it to everybody. Svetlana.
It's, as it was said, it's hard to do any predictions. I just can share my hopes that the conflict would be solved, but it's really not possible without Russia will. Because, as I said, Ukraine started to observe Minsk agreement and announced a time of silence, but it was violated numerously from the side of occupied territories. And I believe that the government of occupied territories doesn't do anything without confirmation from Russia. So it's like non-stop provocations and so on. So I just hope that one day it will be Russia will say to their satellites to stop. But what I want to say is that according to my opinion, Donbass card is just played because of Crimea. Putin has already said, and maybe it's like his idea to change Donbass to Crimea. So the situation in Donbass will proceed and proceed, and Putin will bargain and bargain, saying that okay, you will take Donbass, but you forget to Crimea. And it's not his saying to Ukraine, it's his message to Europe and to other world. And the threat is that one day maybe the world will tire from this conflict. Okay, we will forget about Crimea and just let's stop this situation in Donbass.
Thank you, Svetlana. Yuri?
Yeah, I'd like to be optimistic, but considering the fact that there was a referendum in Russian Federation recently, which kind of extended Putin's reign for another 150 years, it's very difficult to see how this will end soon. On the other hand, so which means that we have to be prepared for this to last for years, and I just hope that the leadership of Ukraine has sufficient wisdom and maturity to understand that if we want to bring those territories back, if we want to return them, if we want to reunite with the occupied territories of Donbass as one family, we have to start showing them in a language that they understand that we care. So we have to start showing them that, you know, if their students want to come to study in Ukraine, in Kiev, come on, isn't this a sign that, you know, life is better here than it is in Donetsk? The students, just think about it for a moment. Students from Donetsk occupied region and Lugansk want to come to study the Kiev. That in itself is something that the government should jump on and praise and meet these students, you know, with flowers and take them and give them the best educational opportunities, you know, and make a communication case out of it, you know, promote this as a light in the end of the tunnel, you know, as a light in the end of the tunnel in a way that this is how we will win the war for their minds and hearts. So in the period that this conflict lasts, my plea to our leadership is to conduct a very sensitive communications policy, to conduct a communications and economic policy that will demonstrate our care and that will heal these rifts and that will help us reconcile. Because if this happens, then we will be ready to reunite any moment, even despite the geopolitical framework and priorities.
Thank you, Yuri. Thank you to all of you. We are just 6 minutes ahead of the time. No, not ahead, but after the time. So it means that the discussion was very intense, and we had a lot of questions and insights from you. Thank you, because I think it will inspire participants and anyone who could listen to us today. What I would say to conclude is that this family analogy was a great one, and it shows that both sides really care about the conflict and try to find. I interpret it on its way, gives a lot of emotion in here, and the key word would be forgiveness from both sides to allow Ukraine to overcome this internal divide that is going on its territory. So I'd like to thank you once more. As I said, if you could suggest us some readings, media, or anything you would recommend us to read to continue thinking about these questions after this panel, you can send it to us and we will share it with everyone. So yeah, I say let's close the discussion then. I hope to see you. I hope to see you with us next time. Because it's not the first Youth Normandy talks, it will happen in the future as well. And yes, thank you very much. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you for
let's keep in
organizing
touch.
this interesting call. All right. Have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for joining.
Bye.
Now we have a pause for 30 minutes and before the next panel begins. So Nisha, you put this so the next panel starts in now 20 minutes. So you can have a coffee break, toilet break as well. And see you in 20 minutes. Michelle, will you put this this nice
Hello, Diana. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Schneider.
Yes. Hello. Good to
I
see
hear
you.
you well. Oh, I like your background.
Yeah, you are still in coffee break for a couple of minutes, right?
Yes, we had another panel this morning about civilians and yeah, the role of international organizations in Eastern Ukraine. So it was very, very intense and interesting. So it just finished 25 minutes ago. Now participants have a little break and we'll start at 30.
Okay, very good.
So sound check passed. Maybe you know Misha, are you here? Mikhail is the coordinator of the forum for Druk. So you probably
Yes,
know
hello.
Maria.
Hello, Mr. Schneider. Hello.
So he's a Russian now in a PhD in Frankfurt, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Located in Frankfurt.
Yeah, Frankfurt am Main. Yes, at the Peace
Okay.
Research Institute Frankfurt. I don't know if you've ever heard about it. HSFK auf Deutsch, Hessische Stiftung Friedens- und Konfliktforschung.
Again, what Stiftung?
Hessische Stiftung Friedens- und Konfliktforschung heißt es.
Okay. Well, I admit I do not really know them.
That's fine. Now you do.
Now I know, yeah. Maybe you can send me a link
yes.
to this Stiftung. Would be interesting. Yeah. Okay. For how long since are you in Frankfurt? Michael, for how long since are you in Frankfurt?
Sorry. I'm in Frankfurt for 1 year, and I'm probably gonna be doing my PhD for at least 2 or 3 years. Yeah, I'm researching into Russian foreign policy in international European security organizations like Russia NATO Forum, Russia EU, Council of Europe, and OIC.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Good. All right. So we still waiting 5 minutes, right?
Yes. If it's okay for you, then
no, that's perfectly fine. How many participants do you have?
This morning, as usual, we have actual participants who take part in the working group. This morning we were about 20, right?
Okay, very good. Yeah. And most of them people who participated also last forums, or quite some new faces?
Some already participated in Druk previous forums, and but most of them have not participated in our events so far.
Okay, very good.
So, and here you can see the list of participants, and you see the countries in which they are living, plus the working group in which they are working, actually.
Yeah. You say, where can I see the countries they do come from?
Just next to their names.
Okay. Now I just opened the list of participants.
So some of them will just come back. You will see more in 3 minutes. So France, Germany, but basically it's France, Germany, Ukraine, and Russia.
Okay, very good.
So and they already.
So if you don't mind, I'll be back then in 3 minutes. Sharp, half past. And we plan for about half an hour, right? So I think I will speak for maximum 20 minutes so that we still have possibility for discussion. How is the mood of the participants? They like to discuss questions, or is more silence?
There were quite a lot of questions this morning, so I guess that maybe we'll gather some. But yeah, I remember that you were quite busy, so yeah, it's completely up to you if you need to leave at exactly 12.
Yeah, well, I may have 5 more minutes, but then 2:05 Moscow time, I would need to leave.
Okay.
Ideally sharp at 2 Moscow time.
Okay,
but
great.
5 minutes overtime is manageable. Good, all right. I'll be back in 2 minutes, all right?
Great, see you.
Okay, gut. Так, ему ссылку лучше здесь отправить, или ты ему на почту отправишь? Потому что мне кажется, он сейчас не запомнит, где это вообще ссылка, и потеряет ее.
Он еще здесь. Он просто замьютился и...
Понял. Но у тебя есть почта Ульфа? Да, ты можешь мне написать в WhatsApp, и я ему отправлю ссылку на наш институт.
Угу. А, ты имеешь в виду эту ссылку? Угу.
Да.
Может быть, я ее тогда добавлю, чтобы это было логично после дискуссии, когда, чтобы благодарить и поставить тебя в копию. Да. Ты мне можешь пока скинуть.
Хорошо, давай, договорились.
Ну, чтобы одним сообщением сразу прислать.
Ну, хорошо, ладно, да, давай. Я сцену на какую-нибудь свою статью.
Так, Лиза, if it does as well.
Так, нам еще заходят люди, нет? Да, он заходит.
Диана, у тебя получилось в Facebook?
Странно. Очень.
Потому что там отмечено, что временная зона неправильная, time zone.
Да. Я вообще не поняла это.
Я тогда новое мероприятие создам, окей?
Давай. Да. Не, поставить Лиза. Лиза.
Да, я здесь.
У меня работает. Может, это как пост добавить?
Ну, проще как бы мероприятие создать.
Ну, давайте сделаем. Я это на всякий случай и там тоже сделаю, чтобы везде.
Так, ну что, уже, в принципе, может потихоньку начинать.
Yes.
Я заканчиваю это. И я буду туда участникам добавлять по ходу, там еще подключается народ.
Okay.
All right, so I'm back. You give me a sign when we start.
Yes, so I think we can start even now. Misha, what do you think?
Sure thing. Yes, we can start now. Yes.
Okay, so welcome back, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this last but not least discussion in the frames of our forum. So here we change completely the topic, and we'll talk about economy and the way current crisis affects economic relations and how we can improve it. And with us we have Mr. Schneider, who is the founder and the president of Schneider Group, which is a consulting company based and founded in Moscow, but who has offices in all CIS countries, including also Austria, if I'm not mistaken. Schneider Group works with Western companies and any companies that want to set business in CIS countries. So we thought that Mr. Schneider will have the best insights on telling us the impact of current crisis on business, and his ideas would be good ideas to take for especially the economy panel. So he will talk for 20 minutes, and we'll have a very short Q&A session. So I will invite those who work on the economy panel to ask questions if you have in the end. Mr. Schneider, the floor is yours.
Yes, Diana, thank you very much for this very kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Very happy to meet you. I remember still quite a lot of forums, events you organized where I participated, well, people say today offline, but I don't like this word too much, where I participated in real life, or whatever one can say instead of offline. I think offline is not a good word for that. Very happy to participate this time then online, unfortunately. I'm calling now from Moscow. That's where I mainly do my business. So as I was introduced, Ulf Schneider is my name. From the list of participants, I see that not so many of you, I think, know me. So allow me to make a very brief introduction about myself. I come originally from Hamburg, the north of Germany, moved to Russia almost 20 years ago. I came to Russia with a German insurance company, was their CFO, their finance director. And then after a couple of years, I decided to set up my own business in Russia. So this indeed was a big step. Decided to set up my own business, assisting international, mainly Western businesses entering the Russian market. And then it developed further, not only entering the Russian market. I opened an office, Moscow, St. Petersburg, then in Kiev, then in Kazakhstan, in Belarus. Then I also went a little bit outside the Russian-speaking countries with an office in Warsaw. And a couple of years ago, I opened an office in Uzbekistan and then also in Armenia. So covering the CIS countries and Poland. And Ukraine, if you don't count Ukraine as CIS country, although from a business point of view, it definitely as a CIS country, it still has the free trade agreement within the CIS. Besides this consulting business that I set up with, in the meantime, 10 offices in the CIS countries and Warsaw and 500 staff. I acquired a publishing house, which is located in Berlin. OWC Publishing House is a German publishing house focusing on publications on foreign trade matters with Eastern Europe, Russia, Central Asia, and China. OWC in German stands for Ost-West Kontakt. And what you may have heard about myself also, about 5 years ago, together with other businessmen, I initiated a working group that lobbies, that works out concepts, how we can create a common economic space from Lisbon to Vladivostok, bringing, first of all, the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union together. I'll say a little bit later some more words on that, but later certainly such a common economic space would include all the countries from the Atlantic to the Pacific on the Eurasian continent. I have a couple of interesting topics, a couple of interesting hobbies, if you're interested. I'm a hobby pilot. I just learned Michael, one of the moderators, he lives in Frankfurt, so that's usually my home airport from where I fly all over Europe. I like traveling a lot, not only by Cessna, but also other ways of traveling. This year, usually I traveled actually more or less 3 days a week to at least, all the time I was at least at 3 different countries every week. Yeah, every week indeed. So this is not possible any longer. So this year I more or less I stayed in Moscow, but not in Moscow, actually in Russia. And this year I used to make a lot of traveling within Russia. So I saw lots of regions that maybe before I did not pay that much attention. Like I went to the Caucasus, I went to the Kaliningrad region, I went to the Ozera Baikal, the Baikal Lake, and many other interesting locations. And I found this also very interesting experience, but I have to admit I miss a lot the international traveling, and I very much hope that this will be possible very soon again. We want to talk about business now. You mainly, during the first 2 days of your conference, I think you mainly had political topics. And I would like to start actually with a very simple and practical business aspect that is related to my own company, but it demonstrates a little bit what opportunities we have between the East and the West, but also what barriers we have. When I started with my own business in 2003, I set up my own company, Schneider Group, so consulting business in Moscow. My German and other friends from the West they told me, Ulf, you're crazy. You, as a German, you never can set up a business in Russia. Russia is corrupt, Russia is bureaucratic, and the Russians will not understand you. My Russian business friends told me another story, but with the same result. Ulf, you're crazy. You can't set up your own business in Russia. If you have $1 million investment, then maybe you could start. So what did I answer? So both of them were sure it will not work out. And I think it demonstrates a little bit also the current situation that we have between business in the East and in the West. On the one hand side, we see a lot of Western European business that already does quite a lot of activities in Russia, in Ukraine, in Kazakhstan, in Belarus, etc. But when you compare it, how many, for instance, German firms do business in France or French firms do business in Germany? And you compare that with how many French and German firms do business in Ukraine and Russia and Kazakhstan. So this is not comparable. They find everything within the European Union rather manageable, but everything what goes outside the European Union and then even to the east, with the Russian-speaking countries, sounds like extremely difficult and almost not manageable for, let's say, the small and mid-sized business. The larger business is a different story. This is not what I want to talk about. I want to talk more about the small, mid-sized business. So what did I answer my friends from the West who said, Ulf, this is not possible. Russia is corrupt, Russia is bureaucratic, and the Russians, you will not understand the Russians how to do business. When they said, well, the Russians will not understand you and you will not understand the Russians how to do business, said, well, I already live in Russia for 2 years. What I can say is the friendship that I experienced and the openness of people is impressive. So here I don't worry at all. Yes, we have differences, certainly. We have cultural, managerial differences, but we have on the business level very quickly, and also on private and personal level, very quickly a very open dialogue that helps a lot to start such a small business like I did. The second question was, Russia is very bureaucratic. You will not manage that. My answer was very easy. I'm a German citizen, and I lived until that time, almost all my life, except 1 year in the US for studies, lived in Germany. I'm very much used to bureaucracy. Germany is a very good example of a hyper bureaucracy in public life. So here I'm experienced, and this will help me to cope with the bureaucracy in Russia. The third point was, yes, Ulf, but Russia is corrupt. And indeed, I remember 2001, when I came to Russia and I asked other business people, what is the problem number one, the challenge number two, and the challenge number three in Russia? The challenge number one was corruption. The challenge number two was corruption. And the challenge number three was corruption. Yeah. Nevertheless, corruption is always something two parties at the same time have to commit to it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And so I said, well, I will not commit to corruption, certainly. Yeah? And the experience shows that it works. I had a great example. This was rather soon after I opened my own business, that the tax authorities, without any reason, withdraw from my bank account a significant amount and claim this is additional tax payment for VAT. And on the telephone, they also admitted that it was a mistake and they will repay it. And we waited a month, nothing happened. My chief accountant went to the tax authorities, and the tax authorities indicated, well, we will repay the amount if you give us 10% of that in cash. What had you done? Maybe some people had accepted this because they had not seen another way out. What I told my chief accountant, I said, okay, let me personally take over. Next day, I went to the tax authorities. I went to the office of the head of the tax inspection. I had a backpack with me, I had my notebook with me, and I had a lunch package with me. And I told him, you know, now I'm here and I will stay in your office until we solve this problem. And I see that on the computer, you generated the payment order that I get my repayment. So he explained me 20 reasons why this will not work. And I explained him 20 reasons why it will work. And eventually what I told him is, and you know, next day I will be in Hamburg. And that was really true. Next day I was in Hamburg for an event where I should talk about the Russian taxation system. And I just clearly told him, tomorrow I will tell this story, how this experience that I have with you, how this ends, and either positively or negatively. Now it's up to you what you make out of that. It took us about 3-4 hours and I had my money back. Nobody believed that to me before I really went there, and I insisted that it should work. I overcame this system with corruption, and it works without corruption. So these were the arguments my friends from the West brought forward. Interestingly, my friends from Russia, they also came with reasons why this will never work to set up my own business. And what they said, you need $1 million investment, Ulf. Otherwise, it's not serious, because what you need to rent a large office. You need to do Euro remont, so that it looks European style. You need to hire a driver. You need to purchase a Mercedes S-Class. You need a cleaning lady. You need a cook. You need a secretary and a bodyguard. Yeah, and you need a bodyguard. I said, okay, that's an interesting business idea, but my business idea is different. I will do it by myself in the very beginning. And I rented a very small office space of about 20 square meters, hired a part-time secretary and one project manager. So the cleaning every evening I first did by myself. So my objective was not to spend $1 million, but my objective was to earn $1 million, certainly. And but if I had listened both to my Russian as well as to my European friends, probably I had not started this. And I'm very glad I nevertheless did it. What I wanted to describe you with that is you hear lots of arguments very often why it may not work. Think it through and find a way to overcome that. In most of the cases, it indeed works. I would like to get back to this business sector a little bit later, in about probably 3-4 minutes. And I would like to make a little bit a bridge from politics, what you discussed the last 2 days and this morning, to business. Politically, I see, so I'm in Russia now in the CIS for almost 20 years. And I realized and I lived during times when everybody was excited about the business ideas. So in 2003, when I set up my own company, 2005, 6, 7. So these were really great years for business, yeah, like Rockefeller times. I also experienced the financial crisis. I realized and had to live with the crisis that started with the question on the Ukraine and what happened with Russia at that time, the sanctions, etc. And I see that politics indeed has influence also on business. However, at the same time, what I personally believe, during times when politics is at a dead end, or at least in very deep problems, and I think between the West and Russia, we can say politically, we live in extremely difficult times. I see it that business and that business has a special responsibility. When politics is in a difficult position, business may take special responsibility. I myself, I can say, indeed for myself, I tried to accept this responsibility. At the same time that I believe in such a situation, business may take a very special responsibility. That is also the reason why I'm very skeptical that such sanction regime like it was implemented from politicians, and here I'm not talking about all the sanctions, but the economic sanctions. I'm very skeptical whether such sanctions really make a lot of sense. Anyway, they do not reach those objectives that those who invented the sanctions, that what they were planning with it. What did I personally mean with, in such difficult, politically difficult times from business, I feel a special responsibility. I, for instance, as I said, started this initiative to work on concepts how we can have a common economic space from Lisbon to Vladivostok. So how to bring European Union and all the Russian-speaking countries again closer together. And for about 5 years now, with in the meantime more than 100 members, business associations and corporates, companies, we work on concepts how, not on a political level, but on an economic, business, technical level, how we can have more cooperation between the European Union and the Eurasian Economic Union and the entire Russian-speaking countries. So here I feel like that's a commitment that I also do from a business point of view during these very difficult political times. Coming back to business considerations. You're interested, I'm sure, how does business work today between Western Europe and Russia? When you just look at the numbers, indeed, you see that import-export activities, and also foreign direct investments of Western European countries in Russia, they dropped dramatically, not only in Russia, also in most of the other countries of the ex-Soviet Union. However, I think we also still see, and this gives me certain hope, we still see that Western European businesses from pure export business to Russia, CIS, also set up production sites. And it's even the smaller mid-sized business very often that starts setting up production in Russia and the neighboring countries. Most of the business goes in this direction from the west to the east, indeed. From the east to the west, from Russia and also the neighboring countries, it's mainly mineral resources, oil and gas. Diversification in this area, unfortunately, does not really work very well. And also when we look at Ukraine, for instance, I know that there are several participants from Ukraine. The association agreement with the European Union grants very limited access to the European Union countries. The European Union here, we have to say, is rather restrictive. That is, from my point of view, a pity. However, what we see is when you look at what goes from the east to the west, we see that in certain service areas, we do have good success stories. Take the IT industry and take digitization. And here we have Ukraine, Russia, Belarus, Armenia is also a very strong IT country, although it's small. But we see that these countries with IT services generate more and more export of services with Western European countries. So this is one example of trade, although it's not trade in goods, but trade in services, where export from the Russian-speaking countries works to the West. Indeed, one has to work much, much more intensively that the business climate in both directions gets improved. I would like at the end of my short speech, I would like to return to what I said in the very beginning about my own business. When I said my friends from the West had very strong doubts, but my friends in Russia also had very strong doubts that it works. What is the reason for that? And why it is so much easier for companies in the European Union to do business with other countries within the European Union. This is, although we have different languages, but this is because we have common standards, we have a single European market, we have no customs barriers, we have no borders, although this year unfortunately temporarily had certain borders. But besides different languages, we are one market in the meantime. And the perception very often, it seems to me, is for Europeans that Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Kazakhstan is totally different. Mentally, Moscow is much further away from Europe than New York. Although in reality, when you take Berlin, from Berlin to Moscow, it's a flight of 2 hours, 20 minutes. So it's like Berlin-Rome. You know? It's next door, more or less. And when you compare what I said also in the beginning, the problem number one, 20 years ago when I came to Russia was corruption. The problem number two, corruption. The problem number three was corruption. Today it is very different. Yeah? Corruption is still a certain matter for foreign investors in Russia, but to a much, much smaller extent, in particular for the small mid-sized business. The problems are more or less the same like you have in the European Union. Lack of qualified labor force, educational system is an issue, etc. What indeed you have as an additional issue is the difference in regulations. So we don't have this common market like we have that within the European Union. And this is what really we have to overcome in order to make much more, not only business, to have much more good, close and friendly contacts between Western Europe and the Russian-speaking countries by creating a single market. That, and this is exactly what I said, what I very much promote with this initiative, Lisbon to Vladivostok, not a political initiative, because if you start a political initiative, the risk that it is dead before you start is quite significant. So better start with projects below the political radar, but with very concrete action steps that bring concrete advantages for small, mid-sized businesses. This is the way how you can overcome the barriers that unfortunately between the West and the East exist. And I see at the moment on the political level that the barriers become even, and the walls become even higher. The more important for us as people from an open society and from business that we do everything to overcome these barriers. So thank you very much that you listened to me. We still have a couple of minutes for questions or discussions, and I certainly would be very happy if there are any comments or questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider, for your for your insight. Before I see Celine has a question, I will add also one of the questions I had. A few years ago, you mentioned just right after the breakout of Ukrainian crisis, you had a little problem between your Russian and Ukrainian offices. They couldn't work together, and you made an initiative. If I remember well, it was a cycle ride on the border. Can you talk about what you did at that time?
Yeah, Diana, that is right. You remember that very well. So this was in 2014, during the peak of the crisis on Ukraine. And I continued traveling a lot between my Moscow and my Kiev office. I did this on purpose even more often because indeed, from that moment on, when we had this very severe and tragic crisis on Ukraine, people in my Moscow and my Kiev office mentally They were friends, they communicated well with each other before, and suddenly everything was lost, communication. So I found it very important to set up new opportunities and new channels for communication. So, and once I was in my Kiev office, and I took a train from Kiev to Moscow overnight, back to Moscow. It was, and I was in the train. I entered the train in Kiev train station. The train was of the Russian RZD railway company, and I was in that concrete coach. I was the only passenger. So in that concrete wagon, in this coach, no other person beside me. I talked a little bit to the Pravodnitsa of this train, and she told me, well, indeed, very few people now travel overnight by train between Moscow and Kiev. And but yeah, welcome on board of the train. And by the way, you get a free drink. Take a beer, a wine, a vodka, or a juice. I said, if you have a good wine, I take a good wine. She said, well, the wine is not really good. We have very good Ukrainian vodka. The Russian train conductor told me, the Russian train conductors told me we have very good Ukrainian vodka. I said, well, during these very difficult times, if a Russian recommends me an Ukrainian vodka, I probably should not resist. So I took the Ukrainian vodka and we talked a little bit to each other. And I remember one very remarkable sentence she told me. She said, well, we from Russian RZD, a Russian railway company, and from the Ukrainian railway company, we are one community. We go together and we run our trains for peace. And I found this sentence so impressive that I said, maybe my Moscow and my Kiev office, we can also do this. So then I initiated a bicycle tour and our Minsk office joined. And we had a great tour at the triangle border of Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. And indeed, the result was that the people came back to good communication among themselves. I can say I was really proud of what we achieved.
Sure, and it allowed also your offices to work better together. It's a great initiative, I guess, and I still remember it. It also impressed me as well. We have now two questions. So Celine and Nastya, Celine first and Nastya then. Make it short so Mr. Schneider can have time to answer.
Yeah, we have 4 minutes left, so I think 2 questions I can answer.
Okay. Hello, thank you for your talk. My question is, what incentives do you think could be created in Eastern Ukraine for foreign investors to want to invest in the region or in infrastructure projects? What incentives could be created? Yes.
And if I may jump in, because my question is super related to this one, overall, which kind of infrastructures or entrepreneurs can be super helpful for the east of Ukraine to, I don't know, to help this region? That's one. And two, whether overall we can say that some entrepreneurships can be like a binding factor to bring back Ukraine together.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. The sad truth probably is at this moment, there is no hope for foreign investments in Eastern Ukraine. If you mean with Eastern Ukraine, Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast. I think before we have political stability in this region, I don't see any chance for foreign investors to return to there. So if I move it on a political level, I think implementation of Minsk II is probably most important. It's a very sad story on political level that principally, it seems to me, on political level, everybody wants to implement Minsk II, but nobody wants to do the concrete steps. And this is a tragedy. If I may make a proposal, I think the current parties involved might not be strong enough to really resolve the issue. So when you have Ukraine, Russia, Germany, France, and then these stupid people from the Donetsk, Lugansk region, those who are have the power at the moment with the help of Russia. If you obviously they together are not strong enough to solve it. It would be good if the OSCE or maybe the United Nations get really a mandate that they work out maybe a proposal or take a decision what now to do, because I don't see that the other parties who at the moment are the decision takers, that they will come to any good solution within the next couple of years. So I'm sorry to say that at this moment I don't see any chance for foreign investments, and I see a need that in politics new proposals come on the table, because the current Minsk II agreement will not lead to a result within the next couple of years.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider.
If there's any question left, I still could answer one question very quickly.
Is there one more? Just unmute your mic and.
If it's okay, I can ask a question.
Yes, that is.
Because we are part of the economic groups and we are working on giving recommendations to improve to solve the conflict by improving economic solutions. Would you have concrete things told us that could help us make recommendations that are useful for the people in the region?
In the region, so Eastern Ukraine?
In the Donetsk region, and Donetsk and Lugansk.
Yeah. Proposals that improve the situation for the people there, you say?
Yeah.
Or for business, I guess.
I heard, well, this will be difficult for me to answer. I do know that this contact group that on economic questions for the Donetsk-Lugansk region, that they are working on very concrete proposals how, for instance, the energy sector, some of the power stations that still partially work, how they could earn money by delivering energy to the other parts of Ukraine. But I'm not really in details, but my belief is if you want to do something good for the people in that region, I think the approach that this contact group of the OSCE has is a very good approach, but it needs to be strengthened.
Yes, and we addressed that this morning about the fact that OSCE observators are in place, but their mandate is really, really limited, so they can only report on what's happening.
If I remember correctly, the head of this contact group on for economic matters, I think, is an ex-German ambassador to Russia, but I'm not really sure. No, but I think, yeah, I think it is an ex-ambassador of Germany to Russia. Good. Dear colleagues, I'm very sorry I have to run now. I admit it's for a private matter, but nevertheless I have to run. Russia has public holiday today, so therefore I ask for understanding that my speech, the discussion with you was limited to half an hour. It was a pleasure for me to be with you. You do a great job. Actually, when I was as young as you are now, I was also a European activist in a youth organization called Young European Federalists. So I believe maybe some of you also know them. I enjoyed it very much, and the spirit I still try to live today. So wish you a great continuation of the conference, a great day, and happy to see you at one of the next events.
Thank you. Thank you
a
very
lot.
much.
Thank you a lot.
Good.
Have a nice
day.
holiday.
Enjoy it. Just a quick reminder for all the participants, please. I've just sent the link to our Zoom chat. We need to switch to the other link as soon as possible, but first we need to close this room that we are able to open another one. So that could take 2 minutes maybe, but we will try to hurry up. And furthermore, I ask you to switch your names into name, surname, country of origin or citizenship, and then your working group. Yes, after the login. Okay, see you in 30 seconds.